My father bequeathed me a house when he died, but my mom kicked me out to live there with her new family. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, one of those dull, forgettable days where everything feels routine. I was scrolling through my phone, lying on my bed, half listening to the hum of traffic outside my window. Then my phone rang. It was my uncle. We weren't close. He never called. The second I saw his name on the screen, I knew something was wrong. I picked up, and the first thing I heard was his voice, tight and flat, like he was trying to hold something back. "Nick, your dad's gone." Just like that. No build-up, no warning. 3 words, and everything in my world cracked. I sat up so fast that my vision blurred. My chest tightened. "What? What do you mean?" "He passed away this morning. Heart attack." A pause. "I'm so sorry, kid." My mind refused to process it. It didn't fit. I had just spoken to him yesterday. Literally yesterday. He was fine. We talked about the game last night, laughed about some stupid joke he made, and now? No way. I waited for my uncle to say something else. Like, "We made a mistake," or "He's in the hospital, but he'll be okay." But he didn't. There was only silence. And in that silence, something inside me collapsed. I don't even remember hanging up. The next thing I knew, I was sitting there, phone slipping from my hand, staring at the wall. My brain kept looping back to yesterday. His voice, his laugh. He was here. He was real. And now, he was gone. I thought I would cry, but I didn't. There was just this numbness, this hollow space where something important used to be. Like I had been gutted from the inside out. The world outside didn't care. People were still walking their dogs, driving home from work, going about their day like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I wanted to scream at them, shake them, make them see that the universe had just ripped my father away. But the world doesn't stop for grief. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes? Hours? Eventually, I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, closed it again. I wasn't hungry, but I had no idea what else to do. I called my mom. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Nick?" "He's dead," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. A pause. A long, unbearable pause. Then, instead of grief, instead of pain, she just sighed. Like this was a minor inconvenience. "I know," she said. "Your uncle told me." That was it. No shock, no sadness. Just those 3 words. I felt something deep inside me harden. "That's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say, Nick?" Her tone was tired, impatient. "People die. It happens." "People die. It happens." My throat tightened. My hands clenched into fists. "He was my father." She sighed again, as if I was being dramatic. "Look, I'll call you later, okay? I have things to do." The line went dead. I stood there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to throw it, break it, scream, punch something to stop the suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. But I did nothing. I just stood there, staring at the floor, drowning in the realization that I had lost my father and, in a way, my mother too. And I had never felt more alone in my life. After the funeral, the real nightmare began. My father had no savings, no life insurance, nothing set aside. Whatever little he had was gone in the hospital bills. I thought my mom would help maybe just enough to get me on my feet. Instead, when I asked, she scoffed. "You're a grown man, Nick. You need to figure this out yourself." I was 21. No degree, no stable job, no backup plan. Just a few dollars in my pocket and an apartment that was still under my father's name. Rent was due in 2 weeks. I applied everywhere. Grocery stores, fast food, warehouse jobs. No one called back. Every day I checked my email obsessively, refreshing, hoping, praying for something. Nothing. A week passed. Then another. Food ran out first. At first, I rationed what little I hate eating once a day, small portions, making sure it lasted. When that ran out, I switched to water. A lot of water. It tricked my stomach for a few hours, but the hunger always came back, sharper, angrier. I felt my body turning against me. The dizziness hit first, making it hard to focus on anything. Then the headaches pounding, relentless. My muscles ached from weakness. My stomach clenched in on itself, desperate for something, anything. I started searching through the cabinets, hoping I had missed something. Crumbs. A half-empty peanut butter jar. A stale slice of bread so hard I had to soak it in water before I could chew. That bread felt like a feast. The cold came next. Winter was settling in, and with no money for electricity, my heater shut off. I wore every layer I owned, wrapped myself in blankets, but the cold seeped into my bones. My breath was visible in the air. At night, I curled up in a ball, trying to conserve heat, shivering until exhaustion finally dragged me under. I called my mom again. This time, I didn't ask for money. Just food. Just enough to make it through the week. She sighed. "Nick, you need to learn responsibility." I swallowed my pride. "Mom, I'm starving." A pause. Then, "I'll see what I can do." I waited. Hours. Then a day. Then 2. She never called back. I stopped calling. Some nights, I lay awake, wondering how long a person could survive like this. I thought about knocking on a friend's door, but pride kept me from it. Instead, I walked to a gas station, staring at the shelves, my stomach twisting at the sight of food I couldn't afford. The clerk was watching me. I walked out before temptation got the better of me. On the worst night, I sat in the dark, cold, starving, and realized no one was coming. No one was going to save me. It was up to me now, and I had no idea what to do next. I was at my lowest when the news came. I was lying on my mattress, wearing 3 layers of clothes, my breath visible in the freezing air. My stomach had long stopped growling. It had given up, accepting defeat. My phone rang, and for a second, I thought about ignoring it. Probably another rejection email, another bill, another reminder that I was sinking. But I answered. It was my father's lawyer. "Nick, your father left you something in his will." I sat up so fast my vision swam. "What?" "The house. It's yours." For a moment, I thought I had misheard. My father's house? The one he grew up in? The one he always talked about fixing up, but never got the chance? A house. A roof. A second chance. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. But the moment my mother found out, everything changed. She called me that night. Her voice was sweet. Almost too sweet. "Nick, honey, I heard about the house." I should have known then. She wasn't calling to congratulate me. She was calling to take it. "You know," she sighed, "your father and I built a life together. That house is a part of me too." I frowned. "You haven't lived there in years." She ignored that. "I just don't think it's fair that I'm left with nothing." I was too exhausted for this. "Mom, I'm homeless. I have nothing." "But you're young, Nick. You have your whole life ahead of you. Me? I don't have that luxury." Here it was. The manipulation. "You don't even have a steady job," she continued. "How will you pay for upkeep? Property taxes? Bills?" "I'll figure it out." A pause. Then she dropped the real bomb. "Would you really let your own mother be homeless?" My fingers clenched around the phone. "You have an apartment." "But for how long?" she sighed, her voice thick with fake sadness. "Nick, sweetheart, we're family. The house should stay with us." I exhaled slowly. "You mean with you?" "I mean with family." I should have told her no right then and there, but I hesitated. Because despite everything, she was still my mother, and she knew exactly how to use that against me. For the next few days, she called constantly. Every conversation was the same guilt, pressure, subtle threats. If I didn't give her the house, I was selfish. If I didn't sign it over, I was abandoning my own mother. I started doubting myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being selfish. But then I remembered the nights I went hungry. The days I shivered in my freezing apartment while she ignored my calls. The way she had shrugged off my father's death like it was nothing. She didn't care about me. She only cared about what I could give her. And I wasn't going to let her take this from me. I made my choice. "Mom, I'm keeping the house." She went silent. Then, in a voice colder than I'd ever heard, she said, "You'll regret this." The line went dead. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid. I was ready for whatever came next. A week passed. Silence. No calls. No texts. I should have known that wasn't the end of it. I hadn't gone to see the house yet. Part of me still couldn't believe it was mine, and part of me was scared to get attached, like if I let myself hope too much, it would be ripped away. But one morning, I woke up and decided, enough waiting. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I took the bus across town, heart pounding the whole ride. I imagined unlocking the door, stepping inside, feeling some piece of my father still there. A place that was mine, finally. But when I got there, something was off. A car in the driveway. Not my dad's. Not mine. I walked up, my breath quickening. The front door looked different. I pulled out my key, slid it into the lock. It didn't fit. I tried again. My fingers shook. Nothing. I knocked. Hard. Footsteps. Then the door swung open, and a man I had never seen before stood in the doorway. Mid-40s, rough-looking, the kind of guy who sized you up the moment he saw you. His lips curled into a smug grin. "Can I help you?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "Who the hell are you?" Before he could answer, I saw her, over his shoulder, in my house, standing in my father's living roomy mother. She didn't look surprised to see me. If anything, she looked annoyed. "Nick," she said, voice smooth, casual, like we were bumping into each other at the store. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "This is my house," she sighed, rolling her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Nick, don't be dramatic." I felt sick. I looked past her, scanning the room. New furniture, new dishes on the table. It wasn't just that she was here. She had moved in. I turned back to the man. "Who is this?" He smirked, stepping forward slightly. "I'm Mark." He stretched out his hand like we were meeting at a dinner party. I didn't take it. My mother gave a tight smile. "He's my fiancé." I thought I misheard her. "You're what?" She shrugged. "We've been together for a while. I didn't tell you because, well, you've been so emotional lately." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. She had done it. She had actually done it. "You changed the locks," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Well, technically I had to," she said, tilting her head. "It's just safer, you know, for Mark and me." She smiled like this was all completely normal, like she hadn't just stolen my house out from under me. I felt my hands curl into fists. "You had no right." "Nick," she cut in, voice full of fake sympathy. "Sweetheart, you have to understand. You're young. You don't need a house right now. But I do." I stared at her, at the woman who was supposed to be my mother, and realized something. She had never planned to let me keep it. All that guilt-tripping, all that manipulation, it wasn't about convincing me. It was about breaking me, wearing me down until I handed it over myself. And when that didn't work, she just took it anyway. I swallowed hard. "You need to leave." Mark laughed. Actually laughed. "I don't think so, kid." I turned to my mother. "I'll call the cops." She didn't even flinch. "Oh, honey." She tilted her head, smiling like she felt sorry for me. "I am the family. The police aren't going to throw a mother out of her own son's house." I wanted to scream, to break something, to shove past them and take back what was mine. Instead, I stepped back. I looked her in the eyes, and for the first time in my life, I saw her for what she really was. Not a mother, just a thief. I turned around and walked away, her voice calling after me. "Nick, don't be ridiculous. Let's talk about this." I didn't stop, but as I walked down that driveway, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms, one thing was clear. This wasn't over. This was war. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, my mother standing in my house, acting like I was the intruder. That smug bastard beside her. The locks changed. The way she spoke to me, like I was a child throwing a fit, like I was the one in the wrong. I wanted to march back there and kick the door down, but I knew that wouldn't do anything. She had planned this too well. So I did the only thing I could. I called a lawyer. The battle begins. The first meeting was brutal. "The good news," my lawyer said, tapping a thick folder on the desk, "is that legally the house is yours. The will is clear." "And the bad news?" I asked, already knowing there would be bad news. He sighed. "Your mother isn't going to go down without a fight." And he was right. She came at me with everything she had. First, she tried to forge documents, claiming that my father had intended for the house to go to her, that there was a missing addendum to the will. My lawyer shredded that argument in court, proving the papers were falsified. Then, she played dirty. I started getting calls from relatives, people who hadn't spoken to me in years. My aunt, my mother's sister, left me a voicemail dripping with venom. "Nick, how dare you do this to your own mother? You're going to throw her out on the street? After everything she's done for you?" I almost laughed at that. Everything she'd done for me? Like what? Ignoring my calls while I starved? Watching me suffer and doing nothing? But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was, when she went to the police, she filed a false report claiming that I had threatened her and Mark, that I was unstable, aggressive, that she was afraid of me. I found out when an officer showed up at my apartment. "We received a report of a domestic dispute," he said, eyes scanning me like I was already guilty. I was so stunned I couldn't speak at first. Then, finally, I forced out, "You think I threatened my own mother?" The officer didn't answer. He just asked if I had any weapons in the house. I had never felt so helpless in my life. My own mother was trying to destroy me. Not just take my house, ruin me. But I wasn't going to let her. Fighting back. I dug my heels in. I found witness-old friends of my father, people who knew he wanted me to have the house. They testified in court, painting the picture my mother was desperate to erase. I hired a private investigator who proved that she had falsified the police report. I wanted to press charges, but my lawyer advised against it. "Focus on winning the house," he said. "Then, if you want to bury her, we'll talk." The trial dragged on for months. Every time I walked into that courtroom, I saw her sitting across from me, acting heartbroken, betrayed, like I was the one who had done this to her. She lied. She cried. She played the perfect victim. But in the end, the truth was stronger. The judge ruled in my favor. The house was mine. I expected her to break down, to beg, to apologize. Instead, she did what she always did. She turned it back on me. As I was leaving the courtroom, she caught up to me, grabbed my arm. "Nick," she said, her voice low and sharp. "You think you've won?" I yanked my arm away. "I don't think. I know." Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Fine, keep your house." Then she leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "But if you do, you lose me." I stared at her. This was her last move, her final power play, an ultimatum: give up the house, and we stay family. Keep it, and we're done. I exhaled slowly, looked her in the eyes, and I made my choice. I stood there, staring at her, the words still hanging in the air like a noose around my neck. Keep the house, but we will never speak again. Give it up, and we remain a family. She thought she had me cornered. Even after everything, after the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, she still believed she could control me, that I'd be too scared to walk away. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch between us, watched as she shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening around the expensive leather bag she must have bought while I was starving. She had always been like this, always made me feel like I owed her something, like her love was a privilege I had to earn. I used to believe it. Not anymore. I took a slow breath. If a house is more important to you than your son, then I never really had a family. Her face twisted, like she couldn't decide whether to be shocked or angry. "Nick!" "No," I cut her off. "I'm done." I turned and walked away. She didn't follow. She didn't call out my name. She just stood there, watching me go. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Walking out of that courtroom should have felt like victory. I had won. The house was mine. I had fought back, refused to let her destroy me. But all I felt was tired. There was no celebration, no triumphant moment, just exhaustion, like I had spent every ounce of energy I had left dragging myself across the finish line. When I got to the house, it didn't feel real. It was empty, cold, stripped of anything that had once made it a home. My mother had taken everything that wasn't nailed down: furniture, decorations, even the damn curtains. Fine, let her have them. I stood in the doorway, taking it all in. The walls were bare, the floor scuffed, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel helpless. I wasn't lost. I wasn't waiting for someone to save me. I had saved myself. A week later, she called. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. She didn't say hello. You really won't apologize? I almost laughed. Apologize? I have nothing to apologize for, I said calmly. She inhaled sharply. You're making a mistake. Number, I made a choice. Silence. Then, quietly, she said, I hope you can live with it. I smiled. I can. Then I hung up, and that was the last time I ever heard my mother's voice. The first few weeks in the house felt surreal. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol. A war I had fought and won. But victory didn't come with the celebration. There were no congratulations, no warm reunions. Just silence. I had cut ties with my mother. The realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in slowly, late at night, when I'd instinctively reach for my phone, only to remember there was no one to call, no one to share good news with. And then I'd remind myself she was never really there, anyway. She had given me life, but she had never been a mother.